My name is Jamie Machik, and I'm with the Nicolay Library System, and our system, along with several others in Wisconsin, are sponsoring this. Hopefully you saw the pre-show announcements. If not, I'll be posting alerts in a question box. So we're going to get started right away. Our first speaker is Carson Block. Carson lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, but he's actually speaking this morning with us in Atlanta, I believe. So Carson, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Well, good morning. How's everyone doing today? Of course, I can't hear you. But I'm assuming that everyone is doing great, that you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning, just as I am. I live in Colorado. I'm on the East Coast this morning, and so mornings are extra early here, but I've been up. I'm loaded with coffee and ready to go. The topic of our presentation has a controversial sort of name. It's called The Great Library Swindle, Your Rights Are at Risk. And I think some of the challenges that libraries are facing right now we're really in risky times. And sometimes we don't realize the responsibility that we have in our communities and just how important we are. So we're going to go down a couple of paths, but I want you to remember just how important libraries are and what you do to make these things happen in your community. Did you like that little sound? Every presentation should start with a provocative opening statement, and so this is mine. I will not read this aloud, but I'll let you read it. It comes from the mouth of musician Frank Zappa, who's passed away many years ago. But I think this is a particularly poignant and cutting to the bone sort of statement. As a musician and just as a very outspoken member of society, Frank Zappa totally understood the importance of libraries, and of course had a little bit of wry social commentary there. Just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Carson Block, and I'm a library technology consultant, but I wasn't always a consultant. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. Before that, I've worked in a variety of library jobs, including at the CERC desk. So I've got that message from the outraged patron when they were very alarmed that they had to pay a 10-cent fine. In fact, I remember that being an early experience at the CERC desk and thinking, come on, it's just a dime. Why are you so upset? But from there, I've worked in a large number of technology projects. I've been a staff consultant for a state agency. I've been an IT director for a library. Worked on, again, many projects, and very large to very small, especially with a lot of small rural libraries, as well as some of the largest libraries in the country. And I also want to let you know that I did participate in the Ugly Sweater Contest. I think I've got a strong entry thanks to my friend Sarah Nesbitt. You'll be sure to take a look at the website to see what it looks like, but I'll give you a clue. Yes, indeed. Bells are on the sweater, but that's just the beginning, so be sure to take a look at that. Today I'd like you to use a thought collector. We have a fairly short time together, but you might see some things that are interesting, and I want you to trust that instinct. We'll have questions at the end. We'll open the floor for questions. Jamie will be moderating those questions and passing those on to me in some way. But if you see something that's interesting, write it down. Even if you don't use it as a question, you might find it valuable later. Just don't let that moment pass. Well, I believe that libraries are under attack right now. I don't think, though, that it's really on purpose. I think in most cases it's kind of accidental. There's some deliberate efforts, I think, but they're not necessarily mean-spirited. However, attacks are happening, and as librarians, it's our job, library workers, librarians, everyone, to be considering the value of the library and forming a response to that. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is this concept of books being the brand of the library. I agree that books are the brand of the library, and the OCLC study from 2011 certainly bore that out. However, the fact that books are the brand of the library is a little problematic, because increasingly our society is, in terms of content and things that are happening all over the world, are increasingly turning to be electronic content. And when we're thinking about ebooks, I actually needed to come up with this Zen cone to fully understand the implications of what an ebook is and what it is not. I believe that ebooks are books and ebooks are not books. And by considering the contrast in those statements, it's really been helpful in weighing the differences between those. I think in most cases, ebooks are really not books. Books are a physical object. They don't change over time. Ebooks can be accessed and enjoyed in a variety of forms, all electronic, all dependent on a device to read them or to produce them in a different way, for instance, for printing out or something like that. This really hit home for me at a recent visit. It was my first visit to, as an adult, to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Library of Congress. And I was surprisingly moved by seeing the Gutenberg Bible. And the reason there are two reasons for that. The first reason is that it represented to me the beginning of our modern information age. I thought, oh my gosh, that is the origin of mass communications right there. That's when the entire world changed, and just the passion that was born from freeing information that was only available to a few people at the time in the world to making it accessible to so many more was astounding. The other thing that struck me is that volume has been unchanged since the day it was printed, and there it was, and it doesn't change. Electronic content is always subject to change, always subject to revision. We can't see necessarily when it changes. And so those are a couple of the differences between ebooks and physical books. And there's many more. We could talk about that for a long time. But that struck me, and that helps me think about those resources. But if our world is increasingly turning over to ebooks, as libraries, we have a problem because we have a lot of ways to get physical materials into our libraries, right? I mean, unlimited types of things, types of methods we can purchase. Now, with ebooks, as most of us in the audience know, that is not the case. Some major publishers do not lease ebooks to libraries. And remember, in the electronic world, the norm is not to purchase things, even though there's some movement to do that with electronic books. The norm is to lease things. In other words, we're paying for access to a material or a resource for a limited amount of time, for the length of that lease. Some publishers who do, though, they're setting boundaries, and these are very famous examples. HarperCollins was the first one, requiring 26 circulations before requiring a repurchase. Penguin started limiting e-content to libraries with the exception of an experiment and others. And I had a different reaction, though, I think, than most people did to the HarperCollins announcement, just as a sidebar, because I want to be clear that we have to separate business and public good. They're two different things sometimes. And we have to remember that publishers are in business. And so when HarperCollins said, when they issued these terms, I looked at that as a positive move. Now, the terms themselves are economics are just too difficult for most libraries to consider or comprehend. That's a way difference in the price. But I looked at that and I thought HarperCollins is thinking about what it takes to do business with libraries in order to survive in a new world of publishing. And so I looked at that as the opening offer between the library or between the publisher and the library, and a place to start negotiating and starting to getting to know each other. Other people, of course, viewed it differently. They were looking at the bottom line and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so different and so onerous, we can't even go further. Other changes are happening constantly on the business, and the Big Six might become the Big Five. Well, we'll see how legal reviews go with this proposed merger of Penguin and Random House. But movement in the market is going to be a sure thing, and it's because, librarian, I want you to listen to me, reading is huge. Reading is huge. Amazon, other companies, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but reading is huge, and I think that libraries should own reading. I don't think we should let it be taken away from us in any way, shape, or form, simply by claiming our right to it and doing what we do now, but maybe doing it in a little bit different way. But more about that in a moment. Now, in fairness, I wanted to make a point. I don't feel a division between libraries and publishers. Now, I know that there is one from talking to people on both sides of this issue, on the publisher side and the libraries. But I don't think that we're looking, when we become polarized over some of the pricing issues and access issues, I'm not sure that we're both in library land and in the world of publishing. I don't think that we're stepping back far enough to really get a good lay of the land. And I think that libraries and publishers really are over the barrel on different sides, but it's the same barrel. And there's someone else in the middle. And who do you think that is? Well, it is the new personal content superstores. And when I say personal content superstores, I want to point out that that is the world that we are living in now. Let's take an e-reader, for instance. When e-readers came out, most of the public thought, wow, they just, we naturally think, what do we get when a new technology device comes out? What do we receive? What is the cool aspect of that? Well, we got a portable way to read the books we love and access those books, carry around a huge collection of materials with us without the weight and without the bulk, and it seemed pretty cool. Now, to the provider of that publishing platform, that ebook reader, that's actually a storefront. it's a portable storefront that lives in our pocket that allows us to purchase things from them. So yes, indeed, it is a reader, and it's a convenient device, and it's an awesome device. It's also to the companies, this is a way for them to sell their wares to us. And the predominant ones, even though the definition of what an e-reader is and a tablet is continuing to converge and mix and match to where it doesn't really matter anymore. It's the one thing that remains the same is a device from Barnes & Noble or a device from Amazon, and in many cases a device from Apple is there to sell you content from that vendor. Now, that's not a bad thing. I think that that's just fine, but that's something we should recognize. And this is where I think is in the middle. These new personal content superstores are in the middle of where libraries are and where publishers are because they are commanding so much attention from the public and they have such a huge market share. And there's a lot at stake. There's a lot to be gained. Remember when the iPad came out a few years ago, one of the first things that Apple did to market it is to emphasize its use as an e-reader. Of course, they want to compete with Amazon. Amazon wants to kind of own our digital experience, our purchasing experience online. And I love this slide. I don't know if anyone else does, but I love this slide because every time that I shop with Amazon, and I do, and I have nothing against any of these companies. I want to be really clear about that. But every time I shop with Amazon, I think it's kind of like Walmart in my pocket. Because when I do price comparison between using my Nook, my Kindle reader, and my Apple iPad, Amazon generally has the lowest prices. And of course, having low prices is one of the things that differentiates Walmart. So a lot of us buy simply on that. Sometimes we stop thinking when we're in the market. We just want to get the same thing for the lowest price in many cases. And I think that that's given Amazon quite a bit of success. Apple used to have something called the Apple Library of Tomorrow. Now, Apple is often thought of as a visionary and enlightened company, but they did something pretty disturbing to me anyway in the early 90s when I was first getting involved in libraries, or in the 90s. When I was first getting involved in libraries, one of the first folks who I talked to as we were exploring this new thing called the Internet was a guy named Steve Sisler, and Steve has passed away. Be sure to Google him. He was just an awesome advocate, early pioneer in community networking and the impact of the Internet on communities. Just a great guy, and He was nice enough to talk to me when I gave him a call, knocked on his door, and gave me a little rundown. But way back then, Apple, they had something called the Library of Tomorrow, and then they closed it. So that was a little distressing. Clearly, the concept of the library didn't play into Apple's strategy, and Apple's a smart company. So that's a disappointing thing to share, but it's a fact, and it's good to look at what companies do in the past as to compare to what's happening now, to really think about what does this mean as we make decisions for our future. Barnes & Noble has been pretty good to libraries. They've taken a completely different approach. They've sponsored Nook Nights, for instance, where they have representatives of the company come. They have devices that early worked really, really well with our primary vendor of e-materials, but we're not their primary market. I feel fortunate every time that our relationship continues to be good with Barnes & Noble. Now, others are getting into the game. I don't know if you've seen this, but TED started talking about this, and now the app is out. They started talking about this, I think, late summer. They think publishing is pretty hot. They have a free app with a very reasonable subscription rate, $2.99 a title, or reasonable subscription. It will have interactive content. They want these books to make use of the tablet in interactive form, and they're introducing a new publishing model, a 50-50 split with authors. Now, TED's really an interesting place to become a publisher. They're kind of getting into the publishing game. I think they're interesting because they know a lot of smart people, right? A lot of smart people give TED Talks, and it's a natural product to have a book from that. What struck me on the press release, though, about this, the blog post, is download the app and help us reinvent the future of reading. So again, as far as the market is concerned and people that are outside of libraries, reading is hot. Don't forget that. So back to the books are a brand thing. Consider for a minute how many ebook options we have in libraries right now. If you could see me, I'm holding up my hand and I'm holding up 5 fingers and I'm saying I've got way too many fingers on this hand to count the number of options we have. Now compare that to the options that we have for physical materials. That's a little worrisome to me. There's just not enough competition or enough access. Now there are a few other companies getting involved in the game. 3M, Reading, and Biblioteca are doing it. And there's also a move that I'm calling DIY, or do it yourself. It's also been called, I think most famously, the Douglas County model, developed in conjunction with the Marmot libraries, both in Colorado. And Khalifa is rolling their own version of that as we speak. And this is the idea where the library purchases rights for digital book materials and then loans them out to patrons. Now, this is an exciting development, but we also have to look at the content that's available. And right now, the primary content that libraries circulate, the stuff that means the most to us as far as loaning to patrons and the most to patrons, that stuff is still not available. So this option is certainly incredibly powerful and incredibly interesting, and should be pursued with those with the resources to do it. But we have to remember that it's not a complete replacement or complete solution at this point, but it's another significant step going forward. Now, some of the problems that we have in libraries, too, are more than just ebooks. In general, libraries are a niche technology market, and we forget that sometimes, especially when we're paying our bills for our ILS systems and saying, oh my gosh, this is expensive. It is expensive for library budgets, but frankly, for the market, no, it's not. This is technology costs a lot. The fact that we have any vendors in the library space, I feel thankful for every day, even though they drive me crazy too. I'm glad that we have people in technology paying attention to our needs and trying to make better products for us as we serve the public. We have a problem, though. Public expectations often exceed our resources and abilities to meet that. The public does expect us at some level to be like Google, and we're nothing like Google, nor do we really want to be, nor should we be. But the expectation, of course, is that we have all these resources that we can marshal. Also, in our attitudes towards technology, a lot of times we just don't give it enough resources. We don't give it enough funds or people or thought, and that's slowly changing across the country. But it's definitely a struggle as we enter into the digital age. Another challenge we have is city governments. Sometimes they smother libraries with love, and I'm sure some of you are smirking out there by this statement. The reason I have a little chick there is because I have a story to tell you about my own family. When my brothers and sisters are older than me, I'm the youngest in the family, and they were children of the 50s, and they got baby chicks for Easter as an Easter present. And one of my sisters, they loved the baby chicks. They were really cute. One of my sisters loved her baby chick so much that she cuddled her baby chick just so close into her hand. And the poor chick suffocated. That was just a horrible story. I know, it's just a horrible story, but when I think about that situation, that's how I think about city governments and libraries. A lot of city governments, and not all, but many city governments say they love and value the library, and they do, except when it comes time for those resources for budget talks and budget times. And the libraries essentially become smothered because they're not allowed to have all the resources that they need to meet public demand. So that's enough bad news, right? What's really at stake? How do we frame this into a way that all this information makes sense and doesn't just completely depress you? I believe that the public good served by libraries is essential to a healthy society and a strong democracy. I believe this deeply, and this is why I work in libraries in the capacity that I do. I think that what we do is unduplicated and unduplicatable anywhere else. And our missions in serving the public good need to transcend these challenges. And we need to remember that we are the only institution with an interest in giving access to ideas, information, enrichment, and enlightenment at no direct cost as a publicly funded good. Through our tax dollars, these services have been shown that they're valued, that we do, and they've been provided for so that anyone walking through the door without discrimination, and I mean our physical door and our virtual doors, without discrimination can access things that they need to live. Increasingly, people are not able to get jobs unless they have internet access, for instance. People are transformed every day in libraries, and that's why these issues are so important to us, to not just sit and watch and sit on the sidelines, but get out there and take a stand and do what we can, where we can, to make a difference. Other people believe this too. This is a shot that just happened a couple days ago. This was from a Vermont library protest. And in this case, they were protesting layoffs, or not layoffs, it was a funding change at the library requiring staff to have to reapply for their jobs, but essentially changing the management structure. These are citizens, these are friends of the library who were protesting this, and they formed this big hug, big chain of holding hands to give the library a hug. But they came out and they said democracy depends on libraries, and I could not agree more. I also believe the primary strength of libraries is that we are hyper-local. We always have been and we always will be, and this used to drive me crazy. As a technologist, it's awesome to have one solution that you can just roll out to everybody and say we're all good, right? Well, early on in my career, I learned how special each library was. And again, it was like, oh, if we could just all do the same thing, then we could get a solution that would take care of this. Our ILSs, for instance, are a perfect example of how special we are as companies try to wrangle with that specialness. But, you know, that is really, really our strength. And I've come 180 degrees and I've fully embraced that the fact that a good library is completely relevant to its community, whatever that community is. So the community standards on content, the the types of things in the library, the feel when you walk in, the sort of service you receive. All those things are completely reflective of the community, and I believe that good libraries are completely reflective of their communities. And I think that that one aspect is an anchor in the storm to consider as we look forward to all these things that are changes in our life and challenges, things that we're wrestling with, trying to figure things out. Just to remember that being reflective of that community need and being connected to our patron is our strength. It always has been, and it always will be. Now, I'm not the only person in the world who agrees with this. I know many of you do in the audience, but also I wonder how many people recognize that scruffy-looking guy with the guitar in the middle of the picture. He plays in a little band called the Rolling Stones. He's actually quite rich right now. They used to be a scruffy lot like a million years ago, and now they're rich English gentlemen. But he's had a storied and hazy past, and this is a quote that you may be familiar with. This one I will read. When you're growing up, there are two institutional places that affect you most powerfully: the church, which belongs to God, and the public library, which belongs to you. The public library is a great equalizer. Now, Keith, in all of his hard living and various stages of consciousness, totally gets the power and the strength of the library as an influential force in people's lives. Now, some people read this as an anti-faith comment. I don't see that at all. This is about having a place where anyone can come. They can get good information to make up their mind, good information to research, to learn, to be enriched, and make up their own minds. It's a refuge for so many people, and it certainly was for Keith. You can see from this picture he has surrounded himself with his own library, both physical and media. So what's so great about libraries? Well, libraries care about your right to access information confidentially by culture and by statute. This is not universal, right? Not everyone cares about that, but we really do. We've got many laws across the country that protect patron confidentiality for accessing information, and every library I've worked in or worked for has a process or a procedure to snap into when the event happens, because it quite often happens. There's investigations, and we certainly cooperate with law enforcement, and we want to cooperate with law enforcement, but by law we have a responsibility to protect patron confidentiality. That's a big deal, but we also do it by culture. People in libraries care about other people, and I think intrinsically realize how important it is to retain that confidentiality for folks. It gives a freedom for people when they come in virtually or in our physical doors. Libraries and librarians are trusted. That was something that came from the OCLC perceptions of library study. And the question I have is, can you say the same about other providers of information? Now, we use a lot of providers of information in our day-to-day. We are an information-driven society. Many of us tote around smartphones, and we have computers, we have screens everywhere we go. They're all providing information, but the point I'm trying to make here is that how many of those do you really trust? I mean, for instance, do you totally trust Google? Do you totally trust Apple? Do you totally trust Verizon? Microsoft? Most people say no. They say, no, I don't totally trust them. However, we do business with these entities, don't we? I mean, sometimes we exchange personal information of our own to access information and services. We think of them as free services, but there's nothing really free. So we're giving them pieces of ourselves to access information. Sometimes we're paying money for that. But I always feel, I'll make this personal, I always feel like I'm at an arm's length of trust with my information provider, and that they're only as trustworthy as as they may be in the worst situation. So, but that's not the case with the library. When people come to the library, they know that we have their best interests at heart, and that is a tremendous strength in the age of information. That makes us a refuge for people, a refuge from the storm. Libraries have significant and sometimes unmeasurable impacts on people's lives every day, 24/7, 365, and the problem is we have no way to measure this, no real way to show impact. It is anecdotal, and that's okay. I believe that many people's lives are transformed from walking in, and you don't know when it's going to happen. They come in, get a tidbit, and it changes their life. And you find out after the fact, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes years or decades. How many stories have you heard where someone says, yeah, I you know, like a successful business person, I came to the library and I learned everything I knew to be a captain of industry. that happens quite a bit, especially locally, especially in local libraries. There's so many entrepreneurs, successful business people who I've talked to who have started that journey for information at the library. There's so many more because of that confidentiality thing that we have. There's so many more that we never hear of, but they're there, and I think that's why people have such an affection for the library. That's why they love the library, and it speaks deep to their heart when they're referring to the library or their local library, because they had a need, and we were able to connect them to the good information, the valuable information, the points of view that help them understand something or to research something that was so important and so crucial to their lives. I think that creates that affection. Now, that's hard to record. And we've had efforts in library land to record that and to you know, collect those anecdotal stories, and we should continue to do that. But I think we need to remember that just because we're not able to make a pie chart or a graph of how many lives have we transformed today, we shouldn't be bothered by that. And part of me wants to say we've transformed every life that's come into the library in some way, shape, or form. And that's something to remember and to gravitate towards as we are facing some of these challenges. Libraries also serve communities in times of crisis, and I don't know about you, but I was overwhelmed by what I saw with the hurricane that's well, it's not a hurricane, it's a superstorm, which kind of freaks me out as it's being referred to as a superstorm. But it was huge, and the response was huge. And I pulled a few clips from New York Public Library, Queens Public Library. The response was direct. I mean, you can see in this photo, you can see librarians out doing their thing on, you know, it's like a pop-up library, right? They are meeting community needs in every way, compelled to do that. Libraries do this all over the country. An example from Fort Collins, Colorado. We had huge fires this year, and fires in Colorado near populated areas are not super common, but we just had tons and tons and tons of fires all summer long. And we had a lot of evacuations, and so the Poudre River Public Library, that's where I used to work. I was IT director there for 8 years, set up portable stations in several locations because these shelters kept moving. You know, they'd set up in one place and then reach capacity, or they would not have enough facilities to meet the needs of the folks. And so they kept moving it around, but they were there for people's needs. And these pictures don't do it justice. These were pictures that they were taking as they were just getting set up, but the resources were just used. You know, they were just overwhelmed with use, and that's an important role that libraries play. This information needs in the age of information is just as important as putting fire out, keeping the public good, keeping the public safety, and something to remember when we're thinking about our own worth. Sometimes we don't grasp and command that ourselves. On the lighter side, librarians do their thing everywhere. Librarians just got to be librarians, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I thought it was pretty awesome. A guy named Patrick Sweeney, who is in California, put together something called the Story Sailboat, and this is quite literally a sailboat that sails around. You can see the pattern, the sailing pattern of some of the trips there on that picture that's on the right side. And they have like a giveaway library. So they show up in a port and they give books away. How cool is that? There's no checkout procedures. There's no barcode scanners. It's just like a portable pop-up library on a boat, spreading the public good, spreading good stuff everywhere. Libraries are a community anchor and an economic anchor. In so many places, when people move to a new community, sometimes the primary things they check, if they have families, they're going to check the school district out, but they also check out the library. The library for many people is a barometer of the health of the community and a centerpiece of their lives. As far as an economic anchor, there have been studies done. There was one a few years back in the state of Florida showing the multiplier effect, and of course online you can get economic multiplier calculators to show the value, for instance, of your tax dollars going into libraries. But libraries are also an anchor in new developments, and in Colorado I've been involved in several where having a library location as part of a new shopping development, for instance, has been incredibly important to the developers. They wanted the presence of the library there, even if there's a bookstore nearby and a coffee shop. There are many coffee shops. It didn't matter. The presence of the library was considered an anchor institution, something that captured the spirit and the values of the community within that development and made it homey. Also, I'm just going to punch this up because it's so fundamental to us. Reading is hot. Reading is hot. It always has been, and we've known that, right? But it's in some ways it's being taken away from us. You know, Amazon thinks reading is hot. They've thought so since the beginning of their company. They have not given up on that concept, and so does TED. Just to punch this back up, TED taking their multimedia and then going into a publishing paradigm that's more print-like, even though it's electronic. These are ebooks. You know, usually it's the other way around. Something starts out in print and then it gets distributed to different forms of media. But in this case, you know, they're kind of going the other direction. Well, they think it's hot too. So my challenge is, shouldn't libraries own reading? Like, I think we do in so many ways. So take it back. Take it back in your communities and take that stand. And I know so many have. I don't want this to sound like an admonishment, but because it's not. But I just see so much action in this in the publishing world as far as owning reading, talking about how important reading is. And I would love to hear and see more library conversations in that area, not within our own world, but within the greater world that we live in and that we serve, just to make sure that we have our place at the table and that people understand that there's a place they can go where their decisions about reading, the influences about what they see, is not driven by economics. It's not driven by, I should say rather, it's not driven by the profit motive of a particular company and the content they own, but is driven by serving the public good, by presenting multiple perspectives on issues and providing access universally to people. I think that's really, really hot, and we are the only ones who do that. The library really is filled with awesome. I'll go back to that slide and take a drink. I think one of the strange things, by the way, about doing a webinar is that right now I'm sitting in a hotel room talking to my computer nonstop. When you do a presentation live, you get to see people's reactions, and you know, you can interact with the folks that you're with. You're in that same physical space. When you're doing this on a webinar, again, I'm sitting in a hotel staring at my screen and laughing at my own jokes. So
We're laughing with you, Carson.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. I'm taking a drink of water, too. Oh, it's nice to hear a voice, Jamie. Thank you.
That's why I thought I'd interject.
So after a while, you think, huh, is anybody out there?
Right.
Well, thank you so much. Well, the library is filled with awesome. Jamie is one of those awesome people. I don't know where indefatigable comes to mind. I think of Jamie and what she's done, especially putting together this webinar series, but so many other things. Librarians care about the success of individuals and the success of our communities, and I would charge that the other providers of information in our society, our success as people is not their primary goal or primary objective. That doesn't mean it's not part of it. Especially there's a lot of companies who are socially aware, socially active, and who have service as their orientation. But it's service in servitude to the profit motive, because frankly, a business is a business. At the end of the day, if a business does not make a profit, if they don't produce more resources, more money than they spent, they cease to become a business. That's actually in the tax code, right? Otherwise, it's a hobby, an expensive hobby. Libraries are not that. We universally, and I'm talking across the board from all the folks who I'm just honored and privileged to work with, librarians care about the success of individuals and the successes of our communities. We are invested in this at the core. The profit motive is not part of that. It's not like we're interested in how successful you may be if you're able to pay me for that success. That has nothing to do with it. It is a greater good. It is a higher calling that most people work for. And in many cases, what I see, in most cases, when I think of a librarian, I think of someone who simply likes to help people. And this is the way that they've chosen to help folks. Now, it's not all super duper rosy, because within our own echo chamber, we're asking ourselves some hard questions right now. And I don't know if any of these questions have come up in your own library, but I would encourage you to, again, if you've got your thought collector handy, I would encourage you to consider one or more of these questions as you're going forward. I really believe in vision and in thinking about big picture items to help us inform our small day-to-day decisions. So when we're doing technology planning, for instance, it's so important not to have a vision statement, because those can be painful. Coming up with that single vision statement, if you've ever been involved with one, it can be horrible, multiple weeks of wordsmithing. I'm not as interested in that, but collecting statements of vision to help guide the next decisions and to guide like the big projects as well as those little tasks, because I believe that if we have simple, unified ways of thinking of things that are important to us, the small decisions we make just automatically line up, and we actually achieve what we're setting out to do, because we've made that so simple. So these questions are kind of confounding. And I don't have, well, I've got some answers, but they're just mine. Your answers are the most important. One question that has been popular for a while: if libraries didn't already exist, and I should say if public libraries didn't already exist, publicly funded libraries, would we invent them today? And one of the debatable factors is when you consider something, just think of yourself as an average citizen. Let's say you're not even totally aware that libraries are still around, or you've got some anachronistic view of what a library is. You're thinking something that either existed in the past or something that never really existed, but some strange, odd, closed place from the past. And you got an iPad, and you had enough income to be able to afford the content that you wanted to buy, would you need a public library? I mean, the iPad and increasingly the devices available from Amazon and from Barnes & Noble are multimedia devices. They've got your own library, your own personal library of media, of books, print books, access to resources, reference resources, sometimes quite striking, like app-driven reference resources to give you more insight on those. Access to the internet, of course, where everything is, right? Every answer is on the internet, right? But to an average, we know that's not true. But to an average person, it can appear that library is not needed. So we're asking this question. We're asking ourselves, what does that mean? Another one that I think is so important is, what is our mission as libraries in the age of information? I feel that libraries have always been the masters of information, and it's a big part of it is access, but it's not just raw access, because anyone with an internet connection, or even coming into the library to use the internet connections that we provide to the public, can have access to a lot of stuff. In fact, so much stuff that it can be unusable or ununderstandable, which is not a word, but anyway. One of the values that libraries provide is evaluating the quality of that information and elevating that to a certain status. Now, we call that collection development, right? Collection development is what makes, I think, that warm, fuzzy feeling happen when somebody is searching for an answer and they come to the library and we provide them with good resources, resources that are worthy of consideration. These are not to push a particular point of view. It is to show and represent the spread of knowledge around this particular area. But now that we are in the age of information, we don't really take that same approach with things that are not in our convenient boxes that we have, quite literally. We really know how to deal well with the print format, and we know how that works. We're completely struggling with the deluge of information coming in electronic forms. I know that there was an early proposal to catalog the internet, and that's not what I'm talking about here at all. But there is so many resources on the internet that don't fit our classifications that we are not considering as part of the equation when answering and helping people find good information. There's entire media types that we tend to ignore because they're not something that we have purchased. And they're not easily catalogable. So that's something that that's especially dear to my heart, because I think we need to wrangle those things. And in fact, the e-publishing experiments from Douglas County, what makes me the most excited about that is not the ebook content, but the steps that represents in taking content that is not in our usual stable of content and making it accessible elsewhere. Another related question is, do we understand the difference between form and function? Now, I love books. I love the way books smell. My nephew, who's in his early 20s, he's in Chicago taking classes at Second City, continually posts about how awesome regular books are. I was just really, it's like, come on, Nick, you're a young guy. I thought you were totally digital. No, he loves that. And I love them too. But I'm not sure that as an institution, as a profession, that we're fully embracing the difference between the form information comes in and the function that the information provides. Now, many places do, but a lot of folks are still thinking, okay, if it comes in a book form, again, I understand what to do with this, I understand where to go with it, I understand how to hook people up. When it comes through the electronic pipe, it's so diverse, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. So I'm not sure that we understand that, but your results locally may vary, because many libraries do understand the difference, and they are taking huge steps in bridging and integrating that into regular library operations. Another question is, should books be our brand? It's a big question, because the image of the book looms large in libraries. Look at our logos. If you want any example, just pull up a logo search in Google Images and look at it. Look at the universal symbol for libraries. There is a book there. The question is, should books be our brand? And I'm not sure going into the future that the concept of a book is the most valuable for what the function of the library is. But this is just my opinion. I think what we offer is so diverse that we need to look at broadening and redefining what our brand is going forward. Now, one of the things I like is access to information, to spaces, and to tools that enrich lives. But this is really, again, a conversation that needs to happen in your home, in your home library area, because of the way libraries are reflective of their communities. I think in some communities, books are certainly the brand and will be for a very, very long time. But in others, they should absolutely not be their brand. It should be something else. So libraries today, I know I went really fast there. What are libraries today? They are places of technology. They're places of physical and virtual connections. Libraries curate and put together local content and send it back to the hive. That is one of the most exciting things happening in libraries is so many public libraries, where before they didn't really think much of their local history collections, are realizing what a treasure and a gem that these pockets of cultural heritage are. They're collecting these, digitizing them, and sharing them back. And in fact, that is going to be one of the primary focuses of the Digital Public Library of America, is to create a venue of sorts and a system of sorts to assist in that process, among many, many other things. I'm fortunate enough to be on the one of the work streams for Digital Public Library of America, and while it's still forming and they're working really, really hard to get things ready for a launch a little bit later this year of the first version of DPLA, collecting cultural heritage and creating ways for communities to contribute that cultural heritage is huge. So this is something that we do that makes us special, because in other cases we're consumers of information. We make that available to others, of course, as part of our mission. But in this way, curating local content and sharing it back, we are creators. Libraries are experimenting, again, with all sorts of different things: content creation, e-publishing, maker spaces, and more. And as a closing remark before opening things up for questions, I just want to emphasize that libraries need you more than anything else. And when I say that, I want to emphasize that you are, what you do in most cases is the foundation of that feeling and that value that people have for libraries in the community. And sometimes we forget that, we don't embrace it, and we don't talk about it enough with other people. We need to do that. We need to have conversations about these issues outside of our, what we call the echo chamber, but in our communities. Not rely on someone else to do that, but we need to take those responsibilities ourselves. This doesn't have to be a scary thing. It doesn't have to be an unnatural conversation. It's simply talking to people about what you do in the library, what you value, what you see, and what you need to make it happen. So that is the extent of my presentation. I think we're doing pretty good on time. And Jamie, I don't have a chat window open, but I'd be happy to respond to any questions that you have collected.
Yes. Sela from Winchester asked, how do we convince our town board that our small rural library provides services that are essential to the community?
Well, I think that the first thing is to ask yourself, are you providing services that are essential to the community? And I don't mean that in a cheeky way. I think that when it comes to talking to town boards, they love dealing, again, with those hard facts, depending on the personnel or the makeup of the board. They like to deal with hard facts. And so as well as anecdotal information, it would be good for, I think, to start with asking yourself, what sort of statistics do we have that show at least our use? So do we have statistics showing our wireless use or our circulation of materials? Do we have any special programs in our library that have an impact in our community? And then to put that together in some really easy to read and digest way. So a single sheet of paper with a couple of bullets that get right to the point, and to use that as a both an official and, more importantly, an unofficial conversation starter to say, we're not, for instance, if I'm understanding correctly, we're not sure that you understand everything that we're doing and how important our work is in the community. We've put together this information to show you some of that. But what else do you need? Because we know we're busy, we know that we're making an impact, and we want to make sure that you're aware of this as one of our community leaders.
Great. Allie mentioned, what about funding for libraries? This, of course, is a challenge. Those who fund libraries think we are only about books. They think about form and not the function. Do you have any comments about that, Carson?
Yeah. Just a couple. Well, that's the universal problem, right? Because the brand of the book being so pervasive, if the other person thinks the book is an anachronism, and therefore the library is too, then you've got your work cut out in educating them as to what that is. Without knowing more about what your particular situation is, I would look for those differentiators for you that show what activities that you are currently doing where you've got some impact in the community that have nothing to do with perceptions of the past, but have everything to do with how you're serving your community and showing that need for funding in the mix of other priorities. Steal some of my slides if they're helpful.
I have a question for you, Carson, and actually I'm going to ask this of all the speakers today because I'm interested in hopefully what all of your varied answers will be. And I would like to know, honestly, where do you see libraries 10 years from now? And you don't have to sugarcoat the answer. You can be honest.
Oh, well, I think I'll be honest. I think if we don't solve the access question actively, so when I say access, this is to e-materials, just because of the publishing market. Publishing popular materials is a backbone of the public library. So if we're not able to come to equitable agreements with publishers, and I think it is agreements. I don't think it's a fight. I don't think we should be battling. I think we should be looking at how we should work together. I don't think there's a huge future for the library because that is, if you look at it at a percentage, that is that's our stock in trade, is popular materials and connecting those directly to people. If we can't get popular materials, or we can't get materials in e-content, I think that I don't think that libraries. I think the question in 10 years would be, okay, so what function is the library serving? If it's too much of an emphasis on simply having a space, for instance, space for gathering, there's lots of public options for that. So I think our public funding would be legitimately at risk if we are not able to address this question of access. And I think we have a strong argument. I think that we're not completely connecting at this point with our partners, with our publishing partners. I know they don't seem like partners, but they really are. They're
Sure.
We rely on them for that. So I think that content, I think the market, and I'm sorry I'm going on and on about this, it's a great question. In the market, when you look at Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Noble, content is king. It drives everything. You can have, for instance, you can have a poorly performing service, but if you've got all the content that people want, it doesn't matter. They'll gravitate towards it. So the library also needs that content, but not. I don't think we have an economic argument in that case. I think we have a public good argument, and we need to keep making that, because if, again, I believe the public good in our society will suffer if public libraries cease to exist, and that's why they're worth fighting for.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Mark asks, what is the role of personal stories in all of this? How vital is it that libraries collect these stories from our local customers?
I think that it provides that context for the numbers, and that if you're able to collect those stories in an ongoing fashion, you should, because they speak to our hearts. the value of libraries. Everyone responds to something differently, and I do believe we need to do a better job with statistics and better statistics about library functions, but we really want to speak to people's hearts as well, because my belief is that we can collect all sorts of statistics, but at the end of the day, some of our most powerful transformational moments do come from stories.
Excellent. Any other last-minute thoughts on anything that was posted or anything that you talked about today before we close?
I don't have anything else. I just want to thank everyone for joining me this morning, and I hope you have the rest of the lineup today is incredibly awesome. I wish I wasn't traveling. I'm going to have to watch the rebroadcast. So I hope everyone enjoys just an incredible day of excellent presenters.
Yeah, we're excited for it too. Well, you definitely started us off on the right foot, Carson. Again, thank you so much. Thank all of you for listening in. Our next session is at 10 a.m. with Sonia Plummer-Morgan, and if you are not signed up for that, you are certainly welcome to do so. Remember, if you are signed up, you have to close out and use the registration link again. It doesn't run continuously. You have to sign in again. So again, thank you, Carson. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, and we will talk to you at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Jamie. Bye-bye.
Bye.